going to introduce Sean McGurk, and he's going to give a presentation on using evidence risk-based management with the cloud. Sean, take it away.
Thank you, everyone. I apologize for not being able to be present today, but hopefully we can address your questions as we go through the presentation. Hopefully you have the slides in front of you, or they're at least being projected. What I'd like to talk about primarily today is the challenges associated with distributed environments and how real business solutions can address those challenges and provide the governance, the risk, reliability, and the mitigation strategies necessary to enable you to operate in a secure environment. We should be on slide 3 at this point. We're going to talk about the various technologies, real business solutions, intelligent network, dynamic cloud, mobile workforce, and connected machines.
We got it. We're there.
Okay, great. And again, as a method of introduction, we're going to take a look at the variety of technologies that are used to deliver distributed capability in a very diverse environment, and also those challenges from a security perspective, so we may better understand how to use our resources to ensure reliability, continuity, and ease of access for information. Next slide, please. As we talk about security in a distributed environment, there's a variety of technologies that are being used. Today we're going to talk a little bit about simplifying that IT infrastructure, and also, which is very important in today's economy, controlling costs, not only for public sector entities, but also for the private sector. So as we talk about security in the cloud, we're going to go through a variety of levels of implementation, and then talk about how those solutions are being provided to the customer base. So when we talk about cloud computing, the first question everyone has is, what is this terminology? And I apologize for use of the word, but this nebulous concept, which is referred to as cloud. So often we hear a lot about things like software as a service, and you'll see a variety of applications that are being used to provide that type of service in a very distributed environment. Whether it's Salesforce.com or Redbox or some of the other streaming applications that are used today to deliver entertainment, as well as information. These are all examples of software as a service. It's essentially platform agnostic, so you can connect with your Mac, you can connect with your Microsoft-based platform, and it enables you to focus more on the content than the infrastructure. Platform as a service is a next level up where you're actually integrating certain distributed capabilities, and that includes in many cases storage as well as access through platforms such as thin clients or distributed servers. These are examples like Google applications. When you go into the Google environment, use your Android device to download applications. These are all examples of where you would have platform services. And then at the higher level, you have infrastructure as a service, and this is something that companies such as Verizon Terremark would offer, where it is a cloud environment that's tailored for your specific needs at your specific directions, and is easily customizable for use in an environment that would require either regulatory compliance or other types of security measures which transcend the normal data access environment. As a public entity, as a government agency, in many cases you're going to have to translate through a variety of these platforms, whether it's providing information to the citizens for registration, controlling health information, or providing those capabilities and services such as receiving and generating payments for a variety of reasons. All of the different systems and all the different requirements are in place to enable you to do that in a more secure fashion. And again, I'm not going to focus too much on the technologies. I know during a cloud session you'll get a lot of information about what cloud computing is, what types of services there are, but I want to focus more on the security aspects and the compliance and regulatory aspects. Often when we talk about cloud, when you relinquish control of the services, you do not relinquish the regulatory responsibilities. And as a government entity, that's very important. On the next slide, please. So where do you find security? again, different models require different solution sets. You know, in a pure public cloud environment where it's a public transport, the information is shared across multiple resources. We do tend to focus on more of a one-size-fits-all approach, and the reason behind that is because we're not really sure of the level of connectivity, the data speeds, the types of platforms, all those elements that someone would use to access information. And in addition, there's not a real high level or high level of control over the end user's applications and platforms. So, for instance, someone may be accessing a service via a public cloud environment, and their particular desktop system may be compromised as a result of the introduction of malicious code or malware. We see this very often in conducting forensic investigations, that the known data elements that are communicating in a distributed environment actually are the first source or first cause of that type of infection or data breach. Often we see teleworking schedules and teleworking solutions open up a particular organization to potential risk simply because of the way the end user or the client application is connecting to the service. So it is a challenge, but when you're working in a very distributed environment, they do tend to focus on that one-size-fits-all. And then finally, you know, the security itself is dependent entirely on the infrastructure. And by that I mean, we rely on the end user to have antivirus, anti-spam, anti-malware software installed. In some instances, you'll see organizations that have a very mature security process, and what they will do is they will actually push solutions to the organization to ensure that they have data integrity when they connect to systems. So that's more or less what we see in a very generic public cloud environment. As we move into a virtual private cloud environment, you see a higher level of fidelity when it comes to actually providing that segmentation of resources. Here, what you'll notice is that there are more strict controls, and there's a greater capability for an organization to restrict access. And not only access to the systems, but also access to the data that's contained within the environment. So you can actually set up these secure enclaves that would allow a user to gain access to a certain area that their credentials authorize them to approach, but it doesn't allow them to get into other areas of the organization or other data stores, which may or may not be accessible based on the individual authorities and individual credentials. You also have the capability of blocking off your your private address space. So subsequently, you may have a publicly facing website or a publicly available IP range, but then beyond that, it's a pure private space, which is not directly addressable or accessible from the outside world. That enables you to provide those security elements which would not normally be available to you in a public cloud environment. It does make data compilation and data retention more robust, and it also provides the capability of looking at the forensic data when associated with a breach type situation, and enables you to better protect that data. Also, you do have a guarantee, as best as you may, given these distributed type systems, of availability. And that's really important in continuity of operations or continuity of government services or emergency services. The ability to provide data streams to the general public, to provide emergency warning information, also to simply to have access to the data during normal business operations is invaluable in times of crisis. So to be able to provide that in this type of distributed environment, it actually enhances your resiliency. So you don't have to worry about a single facility or a single organization losing power or losing communications or losing data transmission capability. By distributing it, the load, you also enhance the resilient capability of the organization. And then again, the security is enhanced at the endpoints, because what you may do, which is a good opportunity, is to provide that secure connection capability, again, through either a segmented part of a drive, and there's many technologies out there that do that, a virtual machine, using a client, a thin client, that has a security profile associated with it enables you to better monitor and manage and also track and audit connections, because you're controlling the method by which the individuals are connecting to the environment. And again, that enhances security capabilities, it enhances resiliency. In a pure private cloud environment, which many organizations that have specific regulatory requirements focus more on, it's a dedicated environment. So the data sets, the rules, the requirements, the data access, it's all controlled at the individual level or the organizational level, so that you're better able to manage and control the data and the data sets, and also the access to those sets. It is, in many cases, secure and customizable. In other words, if you need to focus on HIPAA compliance or purchase card information compliance or other types of regulatory regimes, you can ensure that the data integrity model meets those requirements. It helps you to meet those strict compliance and security elements. From a forensic and data breach standpoint, it also provides a very detailed and very functional auditable trail, so that you're able to understand the environment, to track the information, and make decisions based on the risk profiles that you see as they translate and traverse your network. Next slide, please. So in this type of environment, how can you use these, and how can you best identify those elements in which to focus? From a private sector standpoint, when you're looking at the public-facing side of it, you really look at what types of portals or what types of access the citizens need, and also what your partners need to gain access or gain additional information from your organization. Again, this enables you to set those rules, put the requirements in place, and put the controls in place necessary to manage data and provide that security profile. Managing services is a large part of a distributed environment. It enables you to share resources, not only within your own infrastructure, but within the distributed infrastructure of the solution provider. So it's very scalable. It enables you to ramp up. And a great example is normally, and I hate to use this as an example, but during tax season, for instance, when we were working with the federal government, with the Internal Revenue Service, they see a large increase in activity and increase in access, obviously, from the January to April timeframe than they would see, in August or September, for instance. So to have a scalable capability in a secure environment enables you to provide that data connectivity and that access that customers need, which is the citizens, without having an impact on operations. It also enables you to provide updates to your services in a rapid fashion. So by pushing once, it reaches many. In other words, you don't have to go to each individual system or each individual instance of an application and update it. You can actually manage and push those updates at a distributed level, so that the latest version or the latest revision or the latest information that the citizens may be interested in is available to them as quickly as possible. From an information network management perspective, it makes it from you can use centralized management tools. So from an information assurance, information awareness, logging, data, intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, those types of systems and those types of capabilities can be centrally managed and centrally, policies can be centrally adhered to, so that you could provide a greater level of application security, and again, also application auditing, so that if an intrusion does occur, we can gather the evidence necessary to conduct an informed evaluation of the situation and put the risk mitigation strategies in place, pardon me, necessary to prevent further escalation or loss of data, and then also restore services. And we're all concerned, especially in today's environment, with energy efficiency. And this is one area where you can really focus on providing a capability which in the past required large numbers of resources. In this case, you can actually scale your resources in a dynamic environment. So during low use periods, you'll have during low activity, you'll have low use periods, and subsequently your resources will not be as taxing on the local power infrastructure. But when necessary, it can rapidly scale up and then you can gain those efficiencies as a result of using those types of technologies. You can also, though, allow the collective capabilities of private services, other partners, and the citizens to develop new capabilities and new applications. We've seen the growth of remote, remote mobile applications and the ability to access financial information, travel information, emergency services information, healthcare information through mobile devices. So by using and allowing these types of capabilities, not only can your own organization develop new capabilities and provide new services to the citizens, but they themselves can help design and implement new capabilities. So you can use this as a way of providing the services that are of most interest and most desired by a particular group or organization, and then deliver that in a rapid fashion. And then again, as I mentioned before, data storage. We've seen many instances in conducting forensic evaluations with the incident response team at Verizon, where all too often we'll see an organization which has centrally managed, centrally located data storage being potentially vulnerable to massive amounts of data breaches. The incident response teams conducted over 800 forensic investigations over the past several years and identified over 175 million records that have been exfiltrated as a result of gaining access into these data storage environments. Just recently, over this past year, the 2011 Data Breach Investigation Report actually started to focus on cloud storage capabilities. And we found, although the data set is very small, having a distributed storage capacity enables data resiliency and essentially does not allow the adversary to gain access to all of the information, all the critical data, because of the distributed nature of the storage. So it can add a layer of security which is not necessarily inherent in a traditional structure or system. From an enterprise environment, switching from your public-facing capabilities to internal business practices and internal organizational capabilities, application testing and development can actually provide a greater capability for your organization, because you can set up these virtual private environments using virtualization technology and put loads, simulation of loads, and actually really do some advanced testing of applications so that we don't get the challenge of conducting beta tests on the public, which, unfortunately, oftentimes, we're accused of doing simply because all of the possible variations of accessing information are not thought of during the application development and testing process. So it does enable you to really stress those applications and understand what the potential vulnerabilities are associated with them. You can test and develop and rapidly deliver new products and services as a result of this type of capability. And again, keeping in mind that security is one of the primary functions associated with distributing this type of technology, so that you can do it in a fashion that you can understand who the delivered target market is, and then what the capabilities are that they're trying to access. You can also extend your boundaries beyond your perimeter by pushing information out, and especially from a public sector standpoint, you can reach geographically remote individuals and constituents, whether they happen to be in rural areas or urban areas. By providing this distributed capability at a secure level, you can reach areas that you were unable to reach before by brick and mortar applications. So people don't have to come up and wait in line, and everyone likes to pick on the DMV. I won't necessarily pick on DMV, but it's a great example of how, there's a specific level of services required, and the traditional model was everyone get in line and take a number and wait until your number was called. Where now you see, in the state of California, the capability of doing, registrations, renewals, just about everything that you would do in a classic brick and mortar environment can now be done online. And that enables you to extend those services and that capability. Continuity of government and disaster recovery is another great example about how distributed technology can be used in a secure fashion to continue on operations in the event of power failures, weather events, man-made disasters, any type of situation. We learned our lesson significantly during both Katrina, 9/11, Even in Sandy Hook, excuse me, not Sandy Hook, but during Hurricane Sandy, I apologize for that misspeaking. During Hurricane Sandy, the financial services sector, having learned the challenges associated with storing information and providing capability as a result of 9/11, had put in place a distributed operations and distributed node capability so that during the hurricane, when the streets down in lower Manhattan were being flooded and inundated by water, they were able to continue operations, continue business services, because they had remote fail-safe locations where data was still being handled in a live environment. And same thing for government. When I was at the Department of Homeland Security running the National Cybersecurity Center, we focused a lot on, in the event of loss of government connectivity, loss of government continuity, how can we provide that capability so that decision makers at the highest levels of government could provide the necessary direction and also receive the necessary information to conduct operations? And how could we do that in an environment that we could ensure was secure so that the aggressors were not introducing malicious information or misinformation into the decision-making chain? We're all very thrilled and enamored by web applications nowadays, and that's a great opportunity for us to push information down to the lowest platform level, to the tablet level, the mobile level, the personal device level. We see news readers and e-readers being used for data access. You can use your home computer or your desktop entertainment device to provide access for financial data. So all of these applications are being developed. And again, this type of, from an enterprise architecture standpoint, it enables you to identify the customer's needs, identify the organizational resources, and then put them together in a fashion that enables you to better understand what the challenges and capabilities are. And again, from an IT perspective, data storage. I mentioned on the public sector side how data storage is important because it provides that continuity and distribution of information. And again, the same thing applies from an IT perspective because you have access to data at remote locations. So if you're geographically dispersed, or you have organizations that operate in different time zones, for instance, then the ability to access data over a protracted period of times outside of the core business hours enables you to carry on operations without impacting local resources. And again, also from a forensic standpoint and from a risk management standpoint, it distributes the associated risk by not having all of the crown jewels in one location, if you will. It gives you the capability of distributing risk across a broader base. And in many cases, that is shared with other organizations or other government agencies because of the distributed nature of the services. Next slide, please. Reliability and redundancy is a big part, and as the graphic describes here, you don't see too many aircraft flying, especially long distances with one engine anymore. Most recently, I just arrived overseas. I was scheduled to fly on a 787 Dreamliner, and unfortunately, the reason I'm not there today is because the challenges of being rerouted. But when you take a look at what our primary focus is in providing services from a security perspective, from a data continuity perspective, reliability and redundancy are key factors in focusing on enabling technologies such as cloud. Distributed data centers, secure data centers, and that's a key issue, especially working in a government environment. There are certain data handling requirements, whether it's law enforcement sensitive, whether it's health information data that needs to be protected in certain ways, whether it's financial data, purchase card information, or in some cases classified sensitive data. The ability to operate data centers and co-located data centers at different security and regulatory levels is invaluable to the robust operations of any organization. So providing that capability ensures reliability and redundancy over long periods. Also the network infrastructure. During the 2012 data breach investigation report, we looked at the sources of compromise over several hundred incidents that were evaluated, and 1% of all incidents were attributed to network infrastructure. The vast majority, 44%, were attributed to data servers and web servers as the number one source of data exfiltration and penetration. But the network infrastructure itself really only attributed 1% of the total number of breaches that were investigated by the forensics team. The reliance on a robust infrastructure is almost commonplace nowadays. It's not something that, many organizations are pulling dedicated copper anymore. They're relying on those services and those providers to ensure that the network infrastructure itself or the transport layer provides the necessary security, data reliability and integrity, and communications capability necessary. Connectivity is also a key. Having your data available when you need it is key to operations. If the data is sequestered and is unavailable at the moment when it's most needed, it doesn't necessarily serve your functions or the public's functions. So subsequently, you have to look at how can I ensure reliability and redundancy of my connectivity so that I have access when access is required, especially in emergency situations where some standard or traditional communications lines may not be available. Server platforms themselves, I had mentioned, we looked at the statistics from the data breach reports and identified that was our number one area of vulnerability because of connectivity issues, because of platform operating system issues, just a whole host of concerns using the framework that we use to evaluate data breach incidents. We identified that there's a large area of opportunity to provide security services and also to provide reliability and redundancy. Having backups to backups is an important part, and having that distributed capability, the distributed service that the cloud environment provides, helps to take that forward. And again, I've been talking a lot about storage architecture because at the end of the day, data in motion and data at rest are our two biggest challenges. We focus a lot on data at rest and providing security, but data in motion as it traverses these environments is also an area of continued interest and continued concern, especially when we look at the capabilities of some of the more advanced threat actors that are out there. Next slide, please. Security compliance is a big issue. We'll talk a little bit about advanced persistent threat. The challenges that we see nowadays it's not just about gaining information and exfiltrating data from an organization. We saw that during the past year when we were conducting our evaluations and assessments, the number one source of breaches was compromised credentials. So individuals were actually using social engineering and other technical means to gain valid username and password or other types of credentials and actually using those to breach systems. One of the most famous data breaches of a very large security company that markets two-factor authentication was actually the result of compromised credentials. It was not something that would trigger in the intrusion detection or intrusion prevention capabilities or applications because this person was authorized to gain access to the network. Subsequently, they used that unauthorized access to exfiltrate information. So unless there's an advanced heuristics type technology being employed, where you're looking at behavioral-based situations, the classic intrusion detection and intrusion prevention perimeter model runs into challenges, and especially with advanced threats. So that's what we see all too often. By having a distributed, secure enclave type structure, where you have circles within circles of security, enhances your posture and enhances your security profile. We also see that over the past year to year and a half, with the rise of hacktivism and certain hacktivist organizations, they're not just focusing on exfiltrating data anymore. We're seeing the concerted effort to deny, disable, destroy, and disrupt data services and other critical services. We've seen certain circumstances where individuals were gaining access to energy facilities as transmission, generation, and distribution, water treatment facilities. We've seen access into chemical facilities, and these are the types of threats that are starting to manifest themselves in the security environment. Individuals are gaining access not just to exfiltrate data, but to leave behind command and control capability so that they can access these systems at a later date. A lot of that activity, again, is focusing from hacktivists, looking to make a point, especially if they disagree with a particular stance or a particular position an agency or a department may take, all the way up to nation-state level or nation-state sponsored activity that's very sophisticated along the lines of a Stuxnet or a Mahdi or a Shamoon type campaign that uses very sophisticated and very complex code. The architectural security, as I mentioned, is part of the challenge because often we rely on this secure perimeter mentality where we have the hard outer shell, and that's really what we're focusing on. Unfortunately, we're seeing methods by which the aggressors are actually infecting the secondary services types of networks. Now, these are human resource networks. These are customer service networks. In industrial control environments, it's actually the SCADA network that's used for power generation or power transmission. And they're actually using that as a source to introduce their malicious code. So the enterprise environment or the enterprise architecture focusing outward, looking at external threats, they're not seeing any malicious activity approaching the perimeter because the source malicious code is actually already inside the organization, and it's using these non-traditional communications channels and non-traditional communications capabilities to not only infect the organization but exfiltrate data and also provide command and control capability that is not being recognized by classic perimeter security. Physical security is also a big part of it. We see data access being an issue. Some of the elements that fall under physical security are bring your own device policies. And we see time and time again organizations will allow the use of handheld devices as a way to be able to gain access to even email or other services from the organization at the enterprise level. But unfortunately, the inherent security is not applied to those devices. Just recently, one of the larger malware consortiums released an application. It's called Low Ion Orbit Cannon. It's essentially a DDoS type of tool, and they created a version for the Android platform so that you could essentially download the malware onto your handheld device and launch DDoS attacks against an organization, or actually be part of a larger botnet type of capability. It's a challenge going forward. Now, we did see that as the whole bring your own device campaign continues to increase, there are levels of security that can be put in place to mitigate risk. Honestly, during the last year's evaluation, we didn't see a significant number of personal devices being used as a method of data access. Although we did see situations where individuals would take these devices, not use them to access corporate information, but because they wanted to charge the device, they would connect a USB cable to their portable device and then plug it into their desktop or laptop without really recognizing the fact that they've introduced removable media with networking and external communications capability. There is specific malware written for mobile operating systems that we have seen starting to become introduced into enterprise environments. So a lot of these, a lot of the challenges that we see, they fall under compliance and auditing. One of the big issues that is associated, again, is data integrity and data authentication. If you store your data in a cloud-type environment or distributed environment, regardless of who the solution provider is, the requirements to maintain integrity, to audit the information, and also comply with any regulatory regimes rests with the parent organization, with the organization that's responsible for the data. So having that firm understanding and awareness between you and the solution provider as far as who will be conducting the audits, how often they will be conducted, what the outcomes will be, what breach notification requirements are, timelines, and forensic investigation response requirements are. All of those things need to be negotiated early in the process so that you have a better understanding of the capabilities of the data storage situation. Next slide, please. And I've been talking for quite some time, and again, if we have questions, by all means, I can't see you raise your hand, but the moderators in the room will direct my attention. But lastly, I would just like to touch on interoperability and integration. One of the benefits of security from the standpoint of a distributed environment or a cloud environment is it's vendor and it's platform agnostic. And by that, I mean, it doesn't really matter what your base operating system is at the client side, or in many cases, what transport protocols you're using at the enterprise side. By using this type of capability from a security standpoint, it's really vendor and operating system agnostic. You can provide those services, and you can transition from one level of service to the next in a fairly robust environment without having a direct impact on operations. At the application standpoint, again, running in a thin client distributed environment, it doesn't matter what the base operating system or web browser is that the client may be using, because the application itself is operating at the lower level. I mentioned earlier, management systems are then ubiquitous across the environment. You can provide monitoring, whitelisting, blacklisting, malware analysis, other types of capabilities that used to be conducted at an organizational level on an as-case basis at the enterprise level by using a distributed security approach. And a variety of security models are available to you. So you can go from a secure enclave with unidirectional fiber-related communications so that data is only transmitted in one direction and there's not the possibility of correcting the data by unidirectional transmissions, to a completely open architecture, distributed environment where individuals can access basic services and basic information while walking down the street, with a mobile device. So it really runs an entire gamut. And there are risks associated with each model, and that an informed decision must be made as far as what the risk tolerance for the organization is, and then focus on what deliverables are necessary to provide that capability. One of the largest challenges we see today, especially from a security standpoint, are the standards associated with not only information security and cybersecurity, but also interoperability and integration. There are many efforts being led by the private sector, by the federal government. The National Institute for Science and Technology has produced a number of papers on data information, data integrity, information assurance, information security, cloud computing, and they apply at the federal level. They're very beneficial at the state level to look at these recommendations to see how they could best be utilized in an organizational environment, and then provide that guidelines from an application or standards perspective. And then virtualization, I had mentioned earlier, as a way that you can actually mitigate risk. We see this quite often when we're conducting investigations. Indicators of compromise are there in the environment. Unfortunately, in many cases, because of the use of commercially available tools like antivirus scanning, some of the artifacts are corrupted as a result of using that type of capability. In a virtualized environment, you can have your base operating system stored and secured, and if the operating platform becomes corrupted, you could actually reload and refresh on the fly with that secure environment, not losing any data integrity or connectivity, and actually providing a more secure environment. It also enables investigators to compare the as-is to the as-was situation, if you will, when we're looking at a potential breach, because you can see what the delta is between the code, the applications, the modifications of those MD5 hash values associated with the software, and better understand what the potential risks are. And then using these various appliances, you're better able to understand what the challenges are going forward. And finally, on the last slide, I just wanted to leave you with a little bit of history and where we're coming from. From the Verizon standpoint, Verizon Terramark has been focusing on providing secure capability, providing data integrity, managed security services, providing an entire host of capabilities, meeting customer needs at the very secure levels of the federal government, providing classified network operating environments, down to providing purchase card information capabilities across the board. So this is an area that we're very passionate about. In the forensic investigation and analysis branch, we have over 125 forensic investigators globally who operate on every continent except Antarctica. We provide on-site forensic assistance within a 24-hour notice. Everything from e-discovery for organizations that require data handling and data continuity, making sure we follow all the evidentiary processes for testimony if it involves litigation, to restoring services, whether it's enterprise architecture, whether it's industrial control SCADA type architectures. So this gives us a wide variety of capability, and also a large insight into the operations as they're being conducted, and also into the threat landscape and how it's impacting the environment. So that's really all I wanted to share with you today from prepared remarks. So at this point, I'd like to open up to questions. And again, I appreciate your time, your attention, and indulging me on this remote connectivity since I'm unable to do that.
Any questions?
Within the government space, the service level agreements that need to be met, have a lot of there's some live examples out there where Verizon and Terramark have delivered, say for XYZ agency, and met those service level agreements. You mentioned something interesting about being able to provide, if the breach did happen, forensic information back to the client, and it sounds like a pretty responsive amount of time.
Sean, were you able to hear?
No, I missed most of that. Could you summarize, please?
Just regarding service level agreements within the different state agencies that they need to meet when where they're going from a private cloud or private data center into a public environment, as it were.
So the service, what he's asking about, the service level agreements that Verizon offers, and correct me if I'm wrong, right, between the public cloud into Terramark type cloud service.
Yeah, many of the solutions that we provide are focused on the requirements as outlined by the customer, the organization. So from the service level agreement standpoint, for instance, if you're a healthcare organization, you have to maintain HIPAA compliance. We ensure that the cloud solution that we provide is HIPAA compliant and is fully auditable. Again, if it's purchase card information, if it's personal identifiable information, whatever the necessary regulatory requirement or regime is that we need to manage to, we ensure that those requirements are stipulated in the SLA, that the platform and the architecture that we provide meets those requirements, and that you are afforded the level of data integrity and data assurance necessary to meet those requirements. And from a compliance standpoint, we want to make sure that we meet all of those elements and all those challenges, but also recognizing that at the end of the day, you have to be satisfied and you have to be comfortable with the level of security and data integrity necessary to meet your needs, because ultimately the responsibility falls with the organization that is responsible for the data.
That answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think that's it. Thank you very much, Sean. Thank you, everyone, for attending.